This week's DRM Not Included on F5 Live is probably powered by Amazon Prime. We all know you get free shipping, but you may not know that you get a whole lot more. Free music with Amazon Prime Music, free TV, movies, and documentaries with Amazon Prime Video, free video games, and a free subscription on Twitch that you can use to financially support the content creator of your choice with Amazon Prime Gaming, and a whole lot more. We've got quick links to these features and a couple of more, some of our favorites, as well as a 30-day free trial if you're not already a subscriber, and all of that is available by going to f5live.tv/prime. Now, I teased this at the beginning, that there was a company that had sideloading that soon will not. And that company, I actually already mentioned, is Roku. Roku has had sideloading for the purpose that we started to discuss at the top of the show, which is for developers to be able to deploy to test devices to allow a certain subset of their users to test a new version of the application without having to build and deploy to a store and go through the upgrade process and all that. They could do it just from a link, install on the device, and move on. Really great feature. As a developer, I definitely appreciate that they went to this trouble to make this possible, because on iOS, it's not easy. On Android, it's easier, but not great. On iOS, you've got to have an enterprise distribution certificate, and the best way to do it is through a product like App Center, where you can deploy from the side. But what happened with Roku was it wasn't being used entirely by developers, but instead by content creators whose content would not be allowed on the platform. Most notably, adult content. Roku does not allow explicit content in any of their apps, and so sites were just creating Roku apps and allowing you to sideload them. Roku has decided no more of this, and so they have created a beta channel similar to the Android beta channel or test flight on iOS, and you will have to deploy test apps that way. Couple of problems. The first is that means that you have to intimately know your testers, because you've got to get them into the test system. But the big problem is you can only have 10 testers. That's not great. iOS, depending on your app, can have a scale of testers. App Center, you could do as many as you want. But this is 10 testers. I have more than 10 testers on a private app distribution that I'm doing. All your developers are probably going to want to be able to deploy this way. Your internal test team is going to want to deploy this way. You're going to want to be able to send it out to external users who are going to use it different than the developers and the testers are going to. 10's not going to work.
Yeah, that seems ridiculous. The other thing that I was reading about with this, which is I really hadn't thought about before, even though I actually have a whole bunch of Roku boxes in my house, and I use Roku every day, is that there are some side-loadable applications that apparently are not illicit that people do like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, I'm a little surprised to read about this, but there's one called the Wilderness Channel that has nature stuff. Mm-hmm. There's one called Nowhere TV, which has podcasts on it. There's one called iTunes Podcasts that gets podcasts from iTunes. And then there's one called Roku Movies, which is apparently features streaming of public domain movies. Now, what I don't understand is why these channels would have not qualified for Roku the regular way. Do they have to spend a lot of money? Like, what does it take to get onto the Roku store?
Great question. This is a topic that we've actually discussed on GNC Week in Review a couple of times, because the long and arduous process for HBO Max to finally show up on Roku devices was one that we were tracking on that show. So Roku decided, in its early days, Roku was kind of like Android. You submitted, you ended up in the channel store, and we moved on with our day. At some point, Roku decided that they wanted a piece of the action, and so more like iOS, they have become. And so they actually, and in fact, more so, more like cable, they have become in that they negotiate revenue sharing with every channel that has any sort of paid content in a really annoying way. So, in the time that HBO Max was fighting with Roku, I could have written, deployed, and moved on a PLUGHITZ Live app because they wouldn't have cared because we don't charge our users, right? All of our content's 100% free. So I'm looking at a list right now of, interestingly, the list is from PureVPN. I didn't realize it until just this second. It's 22 best hidden Roku channels you should add right now, which is fascinating. But yeah, I don't know why these in particular might be stopped. It might be because they don't want to go through that revenue sharing process, and they found that not fighting with Roku and just allowing it sideload was going to be better for their customers. I don't know.
It's just an interesting question because obviously something, if it's just like a free nature channel, is Roku being a pain about approving stuff? Or because no matter what they say, some stores are really difficult to work with. So it may be that these small time channels found it was too difficult to work with Roku.
So from what I'm seeing here, these 22 that I'm looking at are actually available in this store, but they're not listed. You have to have an access code. So like the space opera channel, Nowhere TV, iTunes podcasts, Wilderness channel. It looks like
those are all the ones I'm seeing here too.
If you have an access code FL82109, you can install the Wilderness channel.
So that's not really sideloading. I guess if it's hidden in the store,
you can literally just have a link and have it install, very similar to how Android works. Which is a cool capability that we're about to lose.
So really, they're kind of cheating. It's not really sideloaded. I mean, whoever's writing an article about sideloading these is cheating because it's not really sideloading. It's finding a hidden, unlisted app.
Right. Now, why is it unlisted? That's a whole other conversation.
Yes, that's a good question.
It's possible that's the agreement, is that without revenue sharing, you can't be listed, but you can be in the store. But illicit content can't be in the store at all. I don't know. I'm gonna have to dive into this a little bit more because it's definitely interesting. Because there's some interesting stuff in here. Pro guitar lessons, silent movies, something called Food Matters TV. Definitely interested in finding out what that is. But if this European Commission thing, the DMA, the Digital Markets Act, goes through, then Roku's going to have to roll this decision right back, which I find really interesting. With this thing on the horizon, that now is the time that they would challenge people. You know what I mean? That you would implement this now with the DMA on the horizon. Just seems like bad timing to me. But
or they're trying to get some of these companies on board with them. And we don't know whether DMA would affect other markets.
Oh, true.
Right. I mean, couldn't they very easily block sideloading in the US, but allow it in the EU? And couldn't Apple do the same with iTunes?
Yeah, for sure. That would totally be a possibility. We don't, with iOS in particular, we don't see a whole lot of that. They have fought that concept pretty hard, right down to there's some in Germany, I think there's some set of apps that are required to be installed on devices by the government. I can't remember what it is. Some like 3 or 4 apps. And Apple said, no. And they came to some agreement that, the App Store can launch at startup or something, but that they would not pre-install these apps. They weren't going to create a different, app, new user out-of-box experience, to use Microsoft's terminology, the OOBE. They weren't going to create a unique one for Germany. They said no. So I don't know. They have really resisted the idea of having a custom build for certain areas. So it would be interesting to see how Apple responds to this. Obviously, Apple has responded very negatively just to the concept so far. And Roku is going so far as basically to thump chests with the EU on this, announcing that they're going to implement this just before the DMA possibly goes into law. So I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's a saber rattle of sorts to show the EU that they're not interested in this. I don't know. But it's definitely interesting. There's a lot of people unhappy about this for so many reasons. The 10 users on the beta channel alone is enough reason for people to be upset about this, because as a developer, I would be. So, I don't know. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of F5 Live Refreshing Technology. If you did, please subscribe to the channel down below, and of course hit the notification bell, because we know that subscriptions don't mean much on YouTube anymore. If you've got topics that you'd like us to talk about in the future, please comment them down below. And if you'd like to not follow us on YouTube, there's lots of ways that you can follow along with our content by going to PLUGHITZlive.com/subscribe. There you'll see all of our shows and all of the ways that you can watch, listen, and follow along.